Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Miha and welcome to the channel. In this video, we are going to pick up on a discussion that we had a few months ago, and that is the question of what's happening with our brains when we are relying to AI. How do we interact with these tools and how do we exercise judgment? Are AI tools making us smarter, or are we simply offloading more of our thinking and these tools are making us dumber? Some psychologists have suggested that we have two distinct systems which we use to make our decisions, system one and system two. Here's a really simple example. What is 2 times 2? Now, the odds are you couldn't even stop your brain from telling you the answer is 4. And this is an example of system one thinking. System one thinking is fast, it's effortless, and it's often outside of our control. Now, contrast this to system two. What is 17 times 24? Now, maybe you thought back to a system of solving equations from algebra class, or perhaps you reached for a tool that can help you solve this problem, like a calculator. Or maybe you simply said, I'm here to watch a video today, not do complex math problems, and simply didn't attempt it. This is an example of system two thinking. System two is much more critical, involves deeper thought, but it also does take a lot more energy. Now, in this paper, researchers suggest that there is a third system here, a system of thinking that is completely outside of ourselves, one that is completely automated. They argue that AI isn't just a glorified search engine, but it's a tool that can actually help us analyze, make decisions, and in cases with agents, even execute actions. This is different from cognitive offloading, say like using a calculator to solve a problem or using GPS to navigate. They argue that this is cognitive surrender. In other words, we are completely turning over our decision-making process to an automated tool. The question was, how do we interact with these tools and what does this mean for our decision-making process? To test this, researchers designed 3 studies. In the first, they divided participants into 2 groups. Group 1 was asked to solve reasoning problems just using their brain, and group 2 was given access to AI. Now, the group that was given access to AI was given access to a tool that would sometimes give them the right answers and sometimes the wrong answers. And the results indicated that when AI gave the right answers, it increased accuracy. When it gave the wrong answers, it decreased accuracy. In other words, people were relying on these tools and they weren't necessarily critically challenging the answers that it was giving them. Accuracy was following AI, not human judgment. So when AI is right, people benefited. When AI is wrong, people still went along with it. In the second study, they had the same setup, but this time they put participants under time pressure, and they found similar effects. In fact, they found larger effects. People were more likely to simply go with AI because they were under time pressure. So pressure was increasing cognitive surrender. Now, one way to think about that is that when we are under pressure, we are not necessarily making the best decisions. We're looking for shortcuts. And shortcuts usually means turning to intuition. We're trying to make the best decision we can given the information that we have. Now AI comes along and it becomes another pathway for this decision making. Instead of relying on our intuition, we can turn to AI. It's easy, it's quick, and its answers are authoritative, which means we are more likely to accept them, less likely to challenge them. And this raised the next question, which is, what can we do about this? In the third study, researchers decided to examine the role of extrinsic motivators, in this case, money, on participants in the same study. And they found that money was a way to mitigate these effects. So when accuracy mattered and when there was some kind of feedback, people were more likely to challenge the results or to at least critically think about them. So why does all this matter? Well, whether we like it or not, AI is becoming more ingrained in our education, in our work, and in our personal lives. The question is it de-skilling us? Is it making us dumber, or is it helping us sharpen our analytical thinking skills? We need more studies to really understand these effects. And there are clear implications in the workplace. For example, think about the recruitment process. It is no longer sufficient to simply look for candidates who are good at prompting. We also have to look for candidates that know when and how to challenge AI. Perhaps during an interview process, we should also be asking questions of when do you use AI and how to use AI? What's your process for challenging AI answers? If your interview process includes case studies, Maybe something from these studies should be taken and included. Perhaps people should be given wrong answers to see how they respond when AI gives false information. And in education, from schools, universities, and professional development organizations, we have to teach these skills. The goal isn't to stop people from using AI, but to use it more intelligently and in a way that sharpens our judgment and our critical decision making skills. So, what can we do practically to move from system three, from this cognitive surrender, and encourage people to use system two, the critical thinking, where we're more likely to exercise judgment? Well, it turns out that the way to do that is probably the same as what we've been doing to move from system one, using our intuition and gut, to system two. And the best way to achieve this is by introducing friction to our decision making process, which forces us to slow down. Here is an example of this in action. I want to illustrate to you that this is easier to do than it seems. Now, if I ask you to list the days of the week, you would probably list them in an order like this: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Temporal order is how we're used to thinking about days of the week. Now, I'll give you a task. If you want to play along, just pause the video, see how long it takes you to complete this. What I would like you to do is alphabetize the days of the week. Go. How long did it take you? Was it harder than you expected? Did it take you longer than you thought it would? Did you get the days right? If it felt harder, that's exactly the point. This was an example of the same task, one way using system one and another way using system two. Now, there are many things you can do in the workplace to encourage this. For example, you can change the order of things. Next time you have your big team meeting, think about changing the order of your discussions, or perhaps change the environment. Have a meeting in a different place. Go to a coffee shop. Do your meeting outside if you can, or even something as simple as sit in different seats. Small novelties like this can sometimes create enough friction in our thought process to make us slow down. Another way of engaging system two is to explain things. For example, take a complex problem you're working on and take the time to explain it to a colleague who's maybe not an expert in that field. Turns out that when we have to clearly articulate our logic, we're more likely to think about it critically. And another way might be to create lists that hold us and others accountable. And those are all ways that introduce some friction, that slow us down, that help us move from system one to system two. And you can apply the same strategies when you're using AI. For example, do not just accept the first answer. Think about it, challenge it, ask the tool to give you contrary opinions. Ask AI to give you sources and then verify those sources to see if you agree with the conclusion. Or find ways of verifying key points and asking for underlying assumptions on some of the results that you're presented. So we shouldn't just rely on AI for the answer. We should use anything AI gives us as a starting point. AI should be a collaborator rather than a tool to which we cognitively surrender our decisions and our accountability. Whether we want to or not, AI is here to stay, and we should find ways of using these tools to enhance our thinking rather than abdicating it. AI fluency by itself is not enough. Being able to write good prompts is no longer sufficient. The real skill is not getting an answer out of the system, but it's knowing when to slow down, when to question it, and potentially when to override it. In other words, what we need is not better prompting, but better discipline and better decision-making habits. We also need more studies to better understand the long-term implications of relying on these type of tools. It is possible that cognitive surrender and cognitive offloading will impact our judgment, our ability to make decisions, memory recall, and potentially even our brain functions. I'm curious to know what you think. Is cognitive surrender just the next logical step from cognitive offloading? Should we be worried about this? And what can and should we do about this as a society? Do you have strategies that work for you and your team that help you engage the more critical system to thinking when the outcomes and decisions really matter? So let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your own strategies and your own approach to dealing with these type of challenges. Thank you so much for watching the video. As always, if you enjoyed the content, consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing, and I'll see you next time.